Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfoud, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
Welcome, dear listeners. My name is Dr. Ronda Chervin, and I have another program on WCAT, Why I'm Still a Catholic, but this is an interview for an interview. And I am so happy to do this interview with David Moss, the president of the Association of Hebrew Catholics. And the reason is that many times I do interviews with people I'm only vaguely acquainted with, and it can be very good. But it's a big thing if you can do an interview with someone you've known for years personally, and especially people you admire, because some people we've known for ages we don't admire, right? So, anyhow, what I love about David Moss, just for the introduction, is he has a characteristic that there's a Yiddish word for. The Yiddish word is Hamish. And Hamish refers, I think it's only to men, but it refers to men who, instead of being, say, domineering, formidable, stiff, are warm and friendly. And I think the best translation to that is a teddy bear type. And I like that very much. I consider that an enormous compliment to any man I know, because I've known a lot of the other kind. And so I'm telling you this because if you ever get in touch with, if you Google the Association of Hebrew Catholics and you get in touch with David Moss, you will enjoy it enormously, because he's just never cold, rigid, critical, forbidding. He's an absolutely welcoming person. So, David, I hope you like that introduction.
It's more than I deserve, but I'll accept it. It's better than being called domineering or something, that's for sure.
So, David Moss, tell us a little bit, before you tell us about the nature of the Association of Hebrew Catholics, just give us a brief rundown of how you became a Catholic, even though you're from a New York Jewish background.
Okay, good. Well, I was born into a conservative Jewish family in 1941. I grew up, but about a year after my bar mitzvah, around 14 years of age, I kind of lost faith in what I had been brought up to believe in. That was largely due to things I heard amongst I heard my Jewish elders praying, which was beautiful, and then I heard things in private which weren't so beautiful. I was in an Italian Catholic neighborhood, and there was a family of boys that used to beat me up as a Christ killer. So I had very mixed feelings about all religions, and I kind of divorced myself from all of them. But you can't divorce yourself from everything without giving up the whole matrix of values and purposes and meanings in your life. And so that's what happened when I gave up religion. I had to go find that, and I began a search which lasted for 23 years. I studied all the liberal arts, looking to see if I could understand the nature of man, and what my meaning could be in this world and my purpose and all that. And for 23 years, I went through various of the liberal arts, anthropology, sociology, all kinds of things. I wound up in philosophy. And I found some tentative answers, but there were some questions that I couldn't answer. And I thought if I could find the answers to these questions, I would find the meaning and purpose of life. And the three questions I had on my blackboard at IBM, where I worked for almost 30 years, was one, what was the purpose of existence? That anything exists, that existence exists. What does that mean? And then the second, was, how do you explain sacrificial love? And of course, I was a Jew. I didn't know anything about Jesus, so my thoughts had to do with the Jewish and Italian mothers I knew who gave themselves completely to their family, sometimes working on a second shift to save some shekels for their children's education. And then the third question was, and the other big self-donation was the man who threw himself on a grenade to save his buddy's life. How do you explain that self-sacrifice, that self-donation for the benefit of other people? And the third question was, how do you explain the sense of ought? You can learn the law, the Ten Commandments. You can learn how to do what's right and how to determine what's wrong, but you can't teach the sense of ought. Like, I ought to do something. I ought to give myself to this person, and there may be no reward for it. You may even be looked down upon because of you doing it, but we have that sense of ought in it. And there's examples, but I won't take the time now. And so I had those questions on my blackboard, but after 23 years, I had 4 children. I was a big, very prominent, a good job in IBM, and I couldn't find the answers, and I had really reached a low point, really despairing, and I was ready to consider taking my life because I couldn't. My wife, my family, my job wasn't enough. And I remember my elders praying in the synagogue, and I looked up to the ceiling. I don't know why we always look up, but we do. And I said, God, if you really exist, I need to know now. I was in total despair of being able to find the answers to those questions. And God came into my office, and I know I was physically present, but he took me out in my spirit or something, and all I could see was clouds, and then I was back, fully aware in my office, but I was a completely different person. In that moment of time, I discovered there was a true God, a real God. God really existed. I learned the answers to those 3 questions, which I'd not been able to learn through all 23 years of college and reading and studying. And I learned something that no Jewish boy would ever even ask about, that Jesus was his son. So that completely changed my life. And I had been going to a Baptist church with my wife because I wanted to we knew we needed support to teach our children the moral virtues, and we weren't enough to do that. So I heard about the gospel, but I didn't believe any of it. And I had a Catholic friend at IBM who I used to ask a lot of questions, and now that I believed, I asked him what the next step was. He says, well, you have to learn the catechism, you have to get baptized. Well, the Baptist said you have to walk down the aisle and give your life to Jesus. But I knew that baptism was the common element between the two, and I asked my Catholic friend, if I get baptized in the Baptist church, is it good? He says, yes. They believe differently, but the way they do it is legitimate. So I did get baptized, but I wasn't ready to join a church because there was too many questions. And about 2 or 3 weeks later, I woke up one morning, and all that I had studied in history and philosophy and the various liberal arts came together, and I knew that the Catholic Church was the church that God had established through Jesus, and that was the end. And then eventually I found someone to give me catechesis, and in 1979 I entered the Catholic Church through a Capuchin monastery where the priest who was teaching me had grown up in a Jewish neighborhood in Brooklyn and knew more about the Jewish faith than I did. So all my questions were answered, including how can you pray to Mary or the saints? We were always taught just pray to God, but now I knew the answers to those questions. So I was home free, and it played havoc with my marriage. My wife left. It was very easy later on when I met my beshert, Kathleen, to get an annulment. It didn't take anything on the church to give me an annulment. Beshert means you're destined other. My first marriage was wrong. My Kathleen was right. God had blessed it. So in 1979, I entered the church. Kathleen entered the church from an Episcopal background. 1979 was the year Father Friedman launched the association with Andrew Scholl, a Holocaust survivor. And 1979 was the first year of Pope John Paul's to the pontificate. So it was a very, very important, significant year in our life. That's my story in a nutshell.
Fantastic. Praise the Lord. That's amazing. You know, I've known you for so long, and I never heard that whole story from beginning to end. So I'm thrilled for us, for you, and for the church, and for Kathleen. And we pray, of course, for your wife and your children.
Thank you.
Tell the group here just a little bit about how Father Elias became a Catholic.
Father Elias was born into a Jewish family in South Africa in 1916, and he grew up in that family, and he also had problems with his traditions. He didn't know how much of it came from God and how much of it came from men, and he went through college. He became a medical doctor, and during the war, as he was pondering the status, the destiny of the Jewish people. There were two things that I believe, if I recall correctly, that bothered him. One was the Holocaust going on in Europe, external anti-Semitism. That was one problem that threatened the existence of the Jewish people. The second one was how the Jewish people themselves, amongst themselves, were losing their faith. They were drifting away from their traditions. They were intermarrying. They were assimilating into the surrounding cultures. And he was trying to understand these threats to the Jewish people. And all of a sudden, he says he was pierced by a shaft of light, and he began to understand that there was a lot to the story, and he started rereading the Old Testament and applying it to his life, and he began to talk to different people, and all of a sudden he saw the reality of Jesus Christ and how that explained everything. And so he was baptized. I think he was baptized during the war, and then he tells a story how he was walking along a beach one day, meditating, thinking, and he all of a sudden encountered a presence in front of him, not one he could see, but it was real to him. And the presence eventually tells him that he should become a priest, which he resisted. He didn't want to do that. But it was uncomfortable, and he was glued. He couldn't move from the spot until he finally said yes to this presence, and then he was freed. And eventually he went to England to study for the priesthood. While he was there, he picked up a book of writings of St. John of the Cross. He read them while he was standing there in the bookstore and decided this is what God was showing him, to become a Carmelite friar. So he was ordained, he became a Carmelite friar, and in 54 or 55 he went to Israel, Stella Maris Monastery, the Carmelite monastery in Haifa, and he stayed there for the rest of his life until he died in 1999. But after many, many years of study, prayer, discussing, talking to Jews and talking to Catholics, lots of meditation, in 1979, he launched, with Andrew Scholl, the Association of Hebrew Catholics. It was his conviction that we had entered into a new era of salvation history, and that God wanted the Jews to come back together again, to come together again as a collective, to fulfill their vocation of being a witness and blessing the world through their collective witness to Jesus and his church, which they couldn't do. Individual Jews have been coming into the church since apostolic times, for 2,000 years. But they came in and they immediately assimilated to the prevailing cultures, which were not Jewish. And there's nothing wrong with those cultures, but it separated them from their people and from their destiny as a collective people, a people who would be a servant of God. And so that remained until essentially Vatican II changes all of that, and the recapture of Jerusalem in 1967, and on the Jewish side, and Humanae Vitae on the church's side, marks a period of transition to a new phase, and he launched the association to begin to gather the people of Israel together to create an Israelite community within the church so they could again serve as a people, a servant people of God, and a collective witness to Jews, Jesus, and his church.
So is this David, is this like similar to Messianic Jews and Jews for Jesus, like a Catholic form of that, where Jews become followers of Christ but don't stop calling themselves Jews? Is it like that, or what would be the difference? For instance, you have people who, if they become Catholics, the Jewish families sometimes disown the people formally or informally. There's a great deal of conflict and a feeling of betrayal. But if they become Messianic Jews or Jews for Jesus, people don't feel the same way because Jew is part of the title.
Okay. I think I can give a brief answer. There is an analogy. There is a similarity. Both Jews in the non-Catholic Christian world and Jews in the Catholic world are beginning to want to preserve their history and their traditions. The Jews in the Messianic Jewish world originally come out of the various Protestant bodies. Now they form their own congregations, so they evangelize their own people. They no longer have to go through Protestantism. So essentially, Messianic Jews are Jews who've become disciples, believers in Jesus, but they do that according to the evangelical Christian theology. That's where they get their Christian theology from. And the reason that their families are maybe a little bit more tolerant or open to them versus the Catholic Church, there's a number of reasons for that. First of all, the Catholic Church is the historic church, the church established by Jesus. So all persecutions, anti-Semitism, anything that has arisen out of the Catholic Church, or I should say out of Catholic cultures, has affected the Jews, and their memory is long. It's part of their tradition to remember, to protect themselves, to preserve themselves. So the church carries that baggage with her, whereas the Messianic Jews coming out of Protestantism, which is also already a revolt against the Catholic Church in the 15th century, they're coming out of the various Protestant churches, and they redefine themselves. They have no ancient sacred tradition to preserve other than their Jewish traditions. But as far as Christology, Christian traditions, they're not preserving it, except in their understanding. So there's a how should I say, they're free. They can open up a storefront or a little home and start afresh. And they don't all agree on doctrine. They don't all agree on traditions and practices. Some believe that they must remain obligated to the Mosaic law. Others say it's a matter of faith and love and devotion, not obligation. And they're all over the place with this. But what they do is they preserve their Jewishness. They preserve their traditions. They primarily don't celebrate Sunday as the Lord's Day. They celebrate the Sabbath. And so all their traditions are recognizable to their people, whereas when you come into the church's culture and traditions has absorbed the culture and traditions of the peoples of the world. And unfortunately, the Jewish traditions have gotten buried and ignored and forgotten. And that's changing since Vatican II. But that's why I think the families are more tolerant of Messianic Jews, although they still oppose it tremendously. But they're more tolerant than they are often of the Catholic
Well, I see.
position.
So you think if people would call themselves Hebrew Catholics instead of calling themselves just Catholics when they become Catholics, that would help their relatives to see they still consider themselves to be Jews in some sense, but in what sense? Because even if groups of Hebrew Catholics decide to celebrate Passover together or to do certain Jewish traditions, it's not obligatory on any Jewish Catholic to do these things. So it's not, let's see.
It's not proclaiming their Jewishness if they don't do that. It's not obvious that they're Jews.
Right, but they might do it. For instance, one of the things the Hebrew Catholic Association is looking into over a long period of time is having more masses in Hebrew, which they do have in Jerusalem. Do they have them any other place besides Jerusalem?
Generally not. There may be the odd one here or there. I think I'm not too familiar with all the liturgical rules, but I think you often need permission to do. If it's not your vernacular, the language of your area, I think often you need permission to celebrate the Mass in another language, which would be the case, for instance.
Tell us a little bit about how the Association of Hebrew Catholics, what it offers either a Jew or a Gentile Catholic, a non-Jewish Catholic who has a longing to understand the Jewish roots of the Catholic Church or just feels drawn to the Jewish aspects of the church history, etc., etc. What could they get out of going to your the Association of Hebrew Catholics chat board or buying the books of your little press called Miriam Press?
Yes. Well, I think first of all, in terms of our website, we're trying to accumulate materials on our website. First of all, it has all the issues of our publication, which is kind of roughly a quarterly, called the Hebrew Catholic. And in each issue of the publication, we deal with different issues, for instance, replacement theology or dual covenant theology, which are both errors, but we deal with them because they have been prominent in the popular theological history of the Church. So our newsletter deals with a lot of these issues when it comes out, and we have them all, on the website. We have a lot of what we're trying to do is take Jewish traditions and recast them in a certain sense so that they can be celebrated in the light of Christ. In other words, when we do a Passover Seder, we're not I don't want to use the word, we're not just doing it as Jewish people do it because they're working from the events of that took place in Egypt a long, long time ago with Moses and the Exodus from Egypt and the establishment of the Passover. That's what Jews work with, and we work with that too. But we also add the fact that God has revealed himself in Jesus, and from the liberation of slavery, he's brought us to the liberation of sin. So that becomes part and parcel of our Seder. It's not just simply an additional prayer. It's integral to the celebration of the Seder, as if it's always been there, because it's part of the full story. We don't just stop with the liberation from Egypt, but we go to the completion, the fulfillment of that, the liberation from sin. So we're trying to do that with all of the various Jewish traditions, and as we put little guidebooks together, little examples, we call them Seders, they're little orders of how to celebrate these things. We put them up on our website, and everything we have on our website is free. I mean, people can download these things. They can, use them. They can tell us what they would like to see different and change. So the website is kind of like a working platform to develop.
I find this, David, it's very strange because I'm very bad at text. But nonetheless, someone got me onto Google right away. So when I say to people, just Google Association of Hebrew Catholics, they don't even know how to do that if they don't Google. So what should they put in the search bar if they want to?
If you don't need to do a search.
When they put this in, they would find the website of the Association of Hebrew Catholics, and also the chat board where people send in questions every day, and whole different members of the Hebrew Catholic Association give terrific answers to questions both Jews have and Jewish converts and also interested non-Jews.
Right. Well, to get to our website is very simple. You don't have to do a search. You bring up your web browser, like Safari or any of the ones I work on a Mac, so that's what I'm familiar with. You bring up your browser, and then on the top line where you have the address of the website, you put www.hebrewcatholic.net. That's all you got to do, and it brings you right to the website.
Oh, not association, just hebrewcatholic.net.
Yeah, you can just put that in, hebrewcatholic.net, and it'll take you right to the website. Okay? Now, as far as we have a Facebook group where people post all kinds of articles. They get into all kinds of very spirited, sometimes really intense discussions. And that's a very easy platform for people who use Facebook. So we're a group. You have to ask for permission to join it, and I or somebody else will grant that permission. And so that's the Facebook group for the Association of Hebrew Catholics. And then there's an email discussion group that's run off of Yahoo. Now, if someone wants to know how to do all these things, all they got to do is write to me. I'll give you my email address. It's D, like in David, dmoss, D-M-O-S-S, at HebrewCatholic.org. HebrewCatholic.org. Or you can write to AHC at HebrewCatholic.org. And if you write to me, I'll write back.
For Association of Hebrew Catholics.
AHC, yeah. AHC at HebrewCatholic.org. And so if you write to me, I'll write back to you, and all the information for how to join the email discussion group or the Facebook group is all there. You can ask for a sample copy of our publication, The Hebrew Catholic. We'll send it out to you with a whole bunch of flyers describing our work.
And
there's no cost.
Out of time, David. So before we close, would you give some sort of idea of over time since this was started, the Association of Hebrew Catholics, which is all over the world, by the way, since it started, would you say that many Jews have become Catholics because of it?
Well, when you say many, I don't have numbers because we don't count that. And what we do is we are not what you'd call an active outreach to Jews. We don't actively evangelize them. The church doesn't want institutional missions to the Jews, but on an individual basis, Jews can be evangelized, and the church says that too. So what we are is an evangelistic presence. And so what happens is we're on the web, we have publications, we give lectures, we have books that we publish, we're developing what we call Havyurah, a prayer study group, where we can study the Jewish, and there's about a dozen of them right now in existence, where we study the Jewish roots of the faith, study the scriptures, study salvation history, etc. So these are all the ways in which we make ourselves present in the world. And what happens is God is the one who moves the heart and mind of any individual, open to the truth, looking for answers, looking to search, and they do. They come on the web and they put in words, they search for Google words like Jew, Catholic, Christian, and when they do that, we come up in the list. And then they make contact with us, and once they make contact with us, we're able to discuss all the various things. And what you brought up in the beginning of the program is a major, major factor, and that is Jews are taught that it's wrong to go to the church, to Christianity, it's the doctrines are false, it's idol worship. There's a million things that we're accused of, and now they're able to talk to us, not just to anybody or to any Catholic who would obviously be defending their position, but they're able to talk to Jews. What made you do this? What made you go into the church? How can you believe in a Trinity, 3 gods? How can you justify the Inquisition? How can you justify the expulsions from Spain and everything else? So we were able to talk to them, and we talk reasonably. We're not trying to force anyone to believe anything they don't want to believe. We just answer their questions. And when they begin to see a collective... Wonderful. What?
Well, we're at the end of our program, dear David, and it was wonderful to hear you explain these things so concisely. And really, I've been a member of this Hebrew since I'm a Jewish convert also, or a Hebrew Catholic. I now have introduced myself as a Hebrew Catholic to people. And I've been following this for 30 years, 40 years maybe. Anyway, I love it. It's a wonderful, wonderful outreach. And so go ahead and read about it further.
Good. And your audience should know that your story and Route to Eternity was the very second book that we published after Father Friedman's book, Jewish Identity. So you've been part of us. You did the introduction to that book, Jewish Identity, which is wonderful. So we've been blessed to have you riding along the journey with us.
Amen. And to all you listeners, if you happen to be Jewish, shalom, which means peace in Hebrew.
That's right.
Amen.
Shalom HaMashiach, peace of the Messiah.
Amen.
Amen.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfoud. Good day.